and welcome to the Victorious Living Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Nikeya Young, and welcome to season 2. Happy New Year. This is the inaugural episode of season 2, and I'm so excited about today's topic. So let's get into it. All right, so this is episode 21, and we're calling this episode The God Factor. Okay? The God factor. What is the God factor, Nikeya? Glad you asked. So, the God factor, I'm defining it as impossible is light work. Okay? So, just think of all the cool stuff you put on your vision board. Just think of your goals and your plans and think of if things that you would do if money were no object. And just let your mind just run with that for a second. Okay. All right. We're back. I don't want to let you do it for too long, but I'm sure you guys were probably imagining, okay, oh, I would buy this car. I would travel to this place, or just in terms of your business, whatever you have, your organizations, you were probably thinking about, oh, I would make this much revenue, right? Which would allow me to be able to afford to do so many other things. But it seems so impossible, so far away. So I have no idea. I see the picture, I see it, but I don't know how to get there. All right, so we're talking about the God factor. What seems impossible to us is nothing for God. Okay? And the scripture, Mark 10:17, basically, with God, all things are possible. Okay? Nothing is too hard for God. So our foundational scripture for today is found in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 3. And I'll explain why I chose this as the foundational scripture. This is the Amplified version, and it reads, "Commit your works to the Lord. Submit and trust them to Him, and your plans will succeed if you respond to His will and guidance." Okay. There's other versions. Commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established and succeed. Your plans will be established and succeed. The Amplified gives you some more conditions. So that's why I read that version. It says your plans will succeed if you respond to His will and guidance. So those conditions on the end are really important because there's a part that we must play. How many of you guys want the God factor operating in your life at all times? Yes. yes, and more yes. Okay. So we'll talk about the part that we have to play. But basically, there's a couple of points that I'm going to be talking about with this God factor. And the first one is, don't be afraid to think big when setting your goals and planning. I don't know about you guys, but I like to think about the end result, what I'm trying to get to. And I like to not temper it to something I know I can do. I'll have the stuff on there that I can do and the steps that I plan to take, but the actual end result that I'm ultimately doing these steps to try to get to is usually something that is so big that there is no way I can possibly do it on my own. And that is exactly what we as Kingdom Kids should do. If everything on your vision board is something that you can accomplish all by yourself, you need to tweak it, okay? You need to leave room for the God factor. You need to, because it's there, because we're created in the image of God, we have it there. And you know what? It's that little kid inside of us that thinks without limits and hasn't been jaded by society yet, hasn't been told that's not realistic. Oh, you can't do that. That's not possible. Hasn't had any of that yet. So think about back to when you were that little kid and you were just like, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that when I grow up. And I want to be this and I want to do that. And you saw it as clear as day in your mind, right? And so as we get older and life smacks us around a bit, we kind of temper those dreams back. We'll think of something we really want, and that's the thing we want. And then we'll try to taper and tailor that dream into this truncated society-sized box of what we think is possible and work within that. I'm going to challenge you to tweak those things and go back to the initial vision that you saw. Okay? Because it was more than likely a God-sized vision. And then you started trying to figure out, okay, how can I make that possible? Leave room for God. Okay? Leave room for God. So the second point is, this is something cool that the God factor does. The God factor counts you in when others try to count you out. Okay? The God factor counts you in when others try to count you out. You know what else the God factor does? The God factor eliminates steps. It eliminates toil and things of that nature that are common to man, things that are under the curse. The fall of Adam and Eve, when now you're going to have to, because you weren't obedient, now you're going to have to toil. Now you're going to have to eat by the sweat of your brow, all that stuff. Jesus came and redeemed us from that curse. And so the fleshly man nature is to toil into, on my grind, I'm on my hustle, all that stuff, like to try to work. And there's nothing wrong with working hard to get what you want. However, there is another way. When you get the God factor involved, you don't have to work as hard. You can work smarter, not harder. So, do everything that you can do, and then let God, or trust God rather, to do the rest. Let me give you an example of the God factor at work. And I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast. I can't remember. But you guys may have seen me on January 4th. I was on an episode of NBC's hit show, Chicago Fire. And this was actually my third time in less than a year, being on the show. And so we filmed the episode back in November, and there was a fall cliffhanger that happened where the heroine, Stella, goes into a building, and the building, there's an explosion, and we don't know if she lived or died. And so we had to wait all the way to the first Wednesday in January to find out. And so I was in that episode coming back from that big fall finale on January 4th. But before that, last year in season 10, I was in 2 episodes, episode 1017 and episode 1021. Now, before seasons 10 and 11, do you guys know when the last time was that I was on Chicago Fire? It was in season 1. Season 1, the show started in 2012. Okay? So I want you guys to think about that. From 2012 all the way to 2022, I was not in any more episodes. And I'm an actress, I did, before I had kids, I was very much into heavily pursuing a career in entertainment, going on auditions, going to casting calls, just, doing different things to try to make an entertainment career happen. And I had some success with that. But when I had my first child in 2016, I had to scale it back. My husband was away at work. We didn't have, a big, huge family support system or all that, where finding a babysitter at the last minute is like an easy thing to do. That wasn't the case. And a lot of these auditions would just pop up. Like, I would be sitting there feeding my son, and then my phone would ring, and it's like, oh, such and such casting would like to see you for Chicago PD at noon today. And it would be like 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting this phone call. So stuff like that kept happening, long story short. And I just was like, this is getting to be kind of difficult. It's not making sense for me to continue to try to pursue this on the level that I was doing before at this stage in my life. And so I stopped paying my SAG AFTRA dues, and because I was like, I'm not able to go to these auditions and I'm not able to do acting the way that I was doing it before. And it kind of doesn't make sense to keep paying dues for something that I'm not using. Right. And so I didn't withdraw from my agencies or anything like that. I still, maintained my status as an agency signed talent because I didn't want to completely close the door on that chapter of my life. But I just knew that right now I was going to have to, at that season, I was going to have to take a break. And so basically in 2022, so we're going to fast forward from that season, 2016 to 2022. My husband's in his prayer closet one day, and he comes upstairs and he says, babe, I was in my quiet time today and God said, it's time for us to renew your SAG dues. Now, by this time, we've had 2 more kids. So things are even more hectic than they were before when I just had the 1 kid and I stepped away from everything. So how many of you guys know in the natural that doesn't make sense? Like, you're even busier now. You're homeschooling. But he said, God says it's time for us to renew your SAG dues. And so we were just like, okay, let's do it. God blessed us and we got some extra finances in to renew my SAG dues. Now, by that time, because I hadn't paid them in years, I had to back pay my dues up a couple of years to get back to being a SAG AFTRA member in good standing. It was a figure that was just shy of $700. Okay. And we didn't have it, but God said, you need to do this. So we're just like, we're going to pray and we're going to believe God to send the money. We prayed. We ended up getting some money in from a client that was pretty much the exact amount we needed, a little bit more. We paid the SAG dues up. And then we just said, okay, God said, renew the dues. We did it. All right. Now I'm just off to the next thing because business as usual. 2 weeks after we did this, okay, 2 weeks, I get a call from one of my agencies and they ask me, hey, are you available on such and such day for a Chicago fire? And I look at my calendar and I'm like, yes. Now, typically how these things go is that they ask you if they give you a date for the casting. They say, there's, such and such wants to see you, go down for audition for this role. You go down, there's a waiting room full of people. You go in for the director or assistant director or whoever's there, and you say the script that you were given prior to the audition, and you go home, and everyone else in the waiting room has done the same thing that you just did. And so there's kind of no rhyme or reason to it. It's just based on whatever the director wants. And that's how it goes. And then you wait and wait and wait for what sometimes feels like an eternity, but it's really sometimes just a few days, give or take. And then you either get a call back saying, okay, they want you for the next round, or, okay, we're going to do a check availability, which is kind of putting you on hold for it's pretty close to you got it, but they're not telling you got it yet. These are all the steps that usually take place for something like this, just to give you an example. And then they'll say, okay, yay, you booked it. Here's your day, blah, blah, blah. Here's the script. Be here at this time. Your fittings on this day, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's how a typical acting job is booked. That is not what happened. That is not what happened. Okay. The God factor stepped in. I am minding my own business. We have followed the directive to renew my SAG dues. We don't know what for. And 2 weeks later, I get a call from my agent that says, hey, are you available on such and such day? Yes, I am. Not for an audition. Chicago Fire wants to book you. Okay. For a nursing role. That's the role I played before when I was on there in 2012. So they want you to play a nurse again. Oh, okay. Great, you're available. We'll send you the script. What? We'll send you the script. Just like that. You're booked. No, you have to go here for COVID testing day. You have to go here for fitting day. And then after your fitting day, we'll email you and let you know when your shoot day is. Great. See you then. What if I told you every single time? Now, I've been on there 3 times in less than a year. Every single time that I've been on has happened the exact same way. Chicago has become a hub for talent. There's a lot of shows filming here. There's so much talent. I'm so thankful that I got signed to agencies when I did, because it is so much harder to get signed to an agency now because of the amount of shows that film here, because of Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Chicago PD. There's numerous movies filming here. Basically, the acting world in Chicago is really competitive now. CineSpace has expanded its film studios by leaps and bounds the last time I was really acting, because they've had to make up for the demand of the shows and the movies and everything that's coming to Chicago. To book a show, a hit show, 3 times in less than a year, when there are hundreds, probably thousands of actors and actresses in this city vying for the same jobs, when you haven't even been actively pursuing acting because you've been doing other things that God told you to do, and you weren't even current on your dues until 2 weeks prior to this. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, you get booked for a gig, and then they like you, and then less than a month later, they book you for another one. And then you go on hiatus, and you come back season 11, and all of a sudden, you're booked for another one. That is God. I can't take any credit for that, because I literally didn't do anything. I didn't even audition. And that is what I am talking about when I say the God factor. God does things that don't make sense. And he does things that make people that aren't Christian go, that's not fair. I'm sure there's some people probably that I know that may have been like, now, how does she get that? How does she keep getting these? What did she do? That's not, favor ain't fair. And I must say, if you see that happening to someone and it's something that you've been actively pursuing, don't hate, congratulate, because when you're in the kingdom, there is no scarcity. It's not, oh, she's taking up all the opportunities. With God, there are endless opportunities. Everybody can shine. Literally, he can interrupt the flow of whatever anytime he wants, because he's sovereign. He can make your name, appear on somebody's mind for the first time in over a decade and cause you to skip the line and get to the top. Okay? And so I want to talk about this one too. I'm going to do a whole other episode dedicated to the point that I said God counts you in when others try to count you out. Literally, that is going to be coming up soon in the podcast. We'll do an episode about that. There is nothing anyone can do to negate the purpose and the plan that God has for your life when you're operating in the kingdom. Somebody may not like you. Somebody may have somebody else that they prefer. Somebody that may have little cliques and they like to play little favoritisms over here. All of that could be at play. But when you trust in God, when you commit your plans to him and your works are established and you have success and the God factor steps in, that's all she wrote. People can literally be doing everything in their power to stop you from advancing in one area, not knowing that by them doing that, they're causing you to redirect. And in that redirection, God is going to have somebody over here that bumps you up to the front of the line. So, as you're making your plans, 1, think big. Do not be afraid to think big. Don't always think about what's possible for you. What's possible for you is one thing. What's possible for God is something altogether different. Okay? And so include the initial picture that you get in your mind. Don't allow the enemy to try to steal that initial picture from you and say, oh, but you don't have enough money for that. You should scale that back. Don't do that. Okay? So don't be afraid to think big. Don't worry about who's trying to count you out, because when God counts you in, that's all she wrote. And do everything that you can do, and then let God do the rest. Okay? Now, we saw this play out recently in a story that, before I sign off, I have to just acknowledge and give God glory and honor and praise for sparing the life of Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills. We saw recently this young man in a Monday night football game did a routine tackle that happens hundreds of times in football games. He did the tackle. He wasn't tackled. He was the one doing the tackling. He did the tackle. He got up, took a step, and then collapsed. And we all watched in horror and shock and, oh my gosh, as the training team rushed out and did CPR on this young man on national television for 10 minutes. It may have been a little over 10 minutes. All signs pointed to this kid is probably out of here. But the God factor stepped in. Okay? When people were watching a situation that looked impossible, it looked really, after it's been 10 minutes and you're not getting any response from somebody and they have to hook up the AED and all of this is happening, it's like, man, if he does make it at this point, he's probably going to have brain damage. He's probably not going to be, have as much capacity as he had before. All of this, that, and the other. People are making all these speculations, tweeting back and forth about what the prognosis is. How is he going to be able to function because he was out for so long? But a couple of things happened when the God factor stepped in. One, the country and people around the world got united. How many of you guys know we live in a time where everyone is as divided as ever? It's almost like the divided states of America. Everybody is divided according to race, political party, beliefs, that and the other. Everyone was united on praying for this kid's well-being. God got the glory live on the air as sportscasters on ESPN stopped the program and prayed in the middle of the show. So God got his name and his glory out there, and then God showed up, and Damar Hamlin opened his eyes and was able to talk, was able to write out. The first thing he writes, of course, is, did we win the game? God has a sense of humor. And he's fine, and God got the glory. We saw a miracle at the beginning of 2023. And I want you to know that this year kicking off with a nationwide miracle is a sign. So take that sign for yourself and say, when things look impossible, I'm going to let the God factor take over, and impossible is light work for God. All right? So I hope that encouraged you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Victorious Living Solutions podcast. Bye, everybody.